Do you even know your place?
Well, but I had to work late today.
What's the point of a curfew then? Using work as an excuse?
My husband yelled at me, as he usually did. The man who once rescued me from my loneliness through marriage. But years have passed, and that man is long gone. Still, I kept believing, hoping he'd someday return to the man he once was. Finally, I realized how wrong I was. Fine, have it your way. I can cut ties too, you know. I am not your slave. My name is Penelope. I'm 30 years old. I met my husband Alexander 3 years ago. I was grieving the loss of my parents at the time. Invited by a coworker, I reluctantly agreed to go to a party. That's where I met Alexander, an IT professional. He too seemed less than thrilled to be there. I didn't go out of my way to strike up a conversation, but that night, maybe because of job stress, I drank more than usual. Feeling unwell, I stepped outside for some fresh air. Wow, I definitely drank too much. As I rested outside, a voice from behind asked,
You okay?
I turned to see Alexander. Sorry, I just needed some air.
I can take you home if you're feeling sick.
Well, but...
It's fine. Here, let me take your bag. I've already settled the bill.
Wait, then let me give you the money for...
It's fine. Can you manage a taxi? If not, we can walk.
I was easily smitten back then. His kindness got to me, and before I knew it, I was in love. Days later, as thanks for the ride home, I invited him to dinner. From there, we grew closer and eventually became a couple. When I missed my deceased parents and shed tears, Alexander was always there. With his gentle smile, he'd say,
Your tears won't bring them back, Penelope.
I know that.
If you keep crying, your parents won't be at peace.
But...
No matter what, I'll be by your side. You're not alone anymore, Penelope, so please, no more tears.
Alexander...
I'll always be here, Penelope.
How comforting those words were. Since then, I stopped crying over my parents. I looked forward to sharing many more moments with Alexander. As we headed to City Hall to register our marriage, I felt certain of this. We met at a reluctant party, yet that led me to Alexander. However, I was yet to discover his true colors, the true nature of my favorite Alexander. The first hint came about 6 months into our marriage. That's when Alexander suddenly said,
Hey, Penelope, could you cover a little more of the living expenses starting next month?
What? Pay more? Did something happen?
Well, you see, starting next month, my dad and mom asked if I could send them some money.
Hold on, isn't Lucas a government worker? He has a stable income.
I don't fully understand it either, but it seems they're struggling financially. So I want to chip in a little for them from our living expenses. Is that okay?
When Alexander suddenly made this request, I was quite surprised. That's because his father Lucas has been working in the public sector for over 30 years. While his salary isn't exceptionally high, it's not so low that they would struggle. Are my in-laws really struggling so much that they would ask their son to contribute? Despite feeling uneasy, I couldn't flat out say no to Alexander's request. Reluctantly, I decided to pitch in an extra $500 for the living expenses next month. 2 months later, incredibly, Alexander made another shocking proposal.
Hey, Penelope, Could you add another $500 starting next month?
Wait a minute. This time, even I had to call a timeout. That would mean I'm paying almost all our living expenses.
So, is that a problem? I'm having a hard time financially because I'm sending money to my parents.
I get that, but an extra $1,000 is too much. I want to save some money too.
Save? You can save all you want in the future, but I can only support my parents now. Are you going to refuse that?
I was struck dumb by Alexander's terrifying outburst. I had never seen the usually calm Alexander so furious before. Without showing me any mercy, Alexander fired off harsh words.
Hey, are you even listening? Seriously, I've always thought this. Whenever something bothers you, Penelope, you go silent.
Alexander,
I married you, a woman who's not particularly outstanding. Why can't you even listen to your husband properly?
no, that's not what I meant.
Don't get into the details. All you need to do, Penelope, is listen to what I say. If you have time to argue, get the cleaning done instead.
Alexander violently grabbed a can of beer and hurled it towards me. It hit my head hard, scattering the beer all over the floor. Pointing at the mess, Alexander yelled,
Clean that up, you slowpoke!
I couldn't say anything back, left with no choice but to do as told. From that day on, Alexander's behavior grew increasingly tyrannical. 2 years into our marriage, my days were filled with misery. After Alexander started henpecking me, several rules were imposed. The first rule was that I should shoulder all the household expenses. Second, I had to adjust my schedule to Alexander's. Third, I had to see Alexander off and welcome him home every day. Additional rules included doing the cleaning and laundry daily, preparing meals based on caloric count, and being home by 6 p.m. regardless of how busy work was. The rules were almost suffocating. I also work full-time, so it's impossible to devote all my time to Alexander. Still, I tread carefully, not wanting to upset Alexander. Some may wonder why I don't just get a divorce. Some people may think so, but I still believed Alexander would return to the kind man he once was. Then, one fateful day, after finishing dinner, I took a shower once I confirmed that Alexander was asleep. I had been instructed to shower only after he was asleep, so this had become my routine. Upon returning to the living room, I noticed an envelope sticking out of Alexander's bag. What's this? Normally, I would never touch Alexander's personal items, but that day my curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself reaching for the envelope. The front read, "Pay stub," with Alexander's name on it. On a whim, I pulled out the pay stub and checked the amount. The figure was unbelievable. $1.4K? The pay stub showed that Alexander's take-home pay was only $1.4K. With 22 workdays in a month, this amount didn't make sense. You're kidding, right? Alexander's salary is only $1,400 a month? That can't be true. Not when he's working in IT. I've been covering all the living expenses for a year and a half because he said he was supporting his parents. But was this the real reason? The next day, I decided to talk to Alexander directly about it. So I didn't prepare dinner and waited for him to come home. As soon as Alexander got home, I got right to the point. Hey, Alexander, can we talk?
What? Where's dinner? I told you to have it ready by the time I get home.
I need to talk to you about something important.
Something important?
Is it true that you're working in IT, Alexander?
What are you talking about?
I saw your pay stub, Alexander. A take-home pay of $1,400 a month. Doesn't make sense for an IT job. Frustrated, Alexander let out a deep sigh.
Why are you snooping around my stuff, Penelope? That's creepy.
I'm sorry I snooped, but why lie?
I didn't lie. You must have seen it wrong.
No, I saw it clearly. Your salary is, well, $1,400.
Ugh, I've had enough. I'm going out for dinner.
With that, Alexander stormed out of the living room. The front door slammed shut, jolting me back to reality. What's going on? Why is he hiding his income? We're supposed to be partners in this. Something needs to be done. So I decided to call my in-laws and get to the bottom of it. Hello? Olivia, my mother-in-law, answered cheerfully. Hi, Olivia. Sorry to bother you this late. Can I ask you something? What is it, Penelope? Olivia didn't sound like she was struggling. She sounded as cheerful as always. Confused, I asked her directly. Are you and Lucas having financial issues? What? Why would you ask that all of a sudden? I was just wondering, are you thinking of sending us money? No, it's just that... Don't worry. Lucas has a good job and we're doing fine. We have plenty saved up. What about the money from Alexander? We've never received money from Alexander. He never even mentioned it, unlike you, Penelope. Alexander had supposedly been sending money to them for 1.5 years. That's why I had been covering all the living expenses. But Olivia says they've never received anything. There's no reason for her to lie. Finally, it hit me. Alexander had been lying to me all along. But why? The next day, I took an afternoon off from work and headed to the private investigation agency I had researched beforehand. I requested a background check on Alexander. 2 weeks later, when I went to pick up the results after work, the investigator looked at me with a serious expression.
Penelope, I'm sorry to say that Alexander does not work for an IT company.
I figured. So, where does he work?
He is a janitor. Sure, he may clean for various companies, but he's definitely not an IT professional.
I see. My bad feeling had turned out to be true. Alexander had lied to me about where he was employed. I sighed deeply, and the investigator made a bitter face. What's wrong? I asked, and he began to speak slowly.
Well, Penelope, there's one more thing we need to talk about.
One more thing?
Yes. Actually,
what he told me was a devastating truth that I did not want to hear. I took the envelope with the investigation results and headed home, still in shock. It was 7 p.m. When I opened the front door, Alexander was waiting with an angry look on his face.
Do you even know what time it is?
I'm sorry, I had to work late today. It was clear Alexander was lying. Even though I was the one at an advantage here, I found myself apologizing out of habit. Seizing the opportunity, Alexander raised his voice.
Do you even know your place, Penelope?
Today was overtime, so it can't be helped.
What's the point of a curfew if you're gonna use work as an excuse?
An excuse? That's not what I meant.
What about my dinner? I'll divorce you if you neglect your duties.
In that moment, a dull pain ran across my cheek. Alexander had slapped me. And that was the last thread of patience I had snapped. Deception, control, insults, and now violence. How much more will it take for him to be satisfied? I'm not his slave. You can be happy with Alexander. That's what I thought when I got married 2 years ago. I had believed, up until now, that the man who once saved me from loneliness would eventually change. But the Alexander from back then was no more. Or perhaps he was never real to begin with. None of it mattered now. It's time to put an end to all of this. I took a deep breath, looked straight at Alexander and said, "Fine, I'll leave."
What? Penelope, are you serious?
You're talking about divorce, right? I'll go, so you can do as you please.
Hey, what are you talking about? Divorce was a joke. I'm not going through with it.
Clearly, he hadn't expected me to agree to a divorce so easily. Alexander started to panic. Ignoring him, I continued. Joke or not, I'm serious. I'll pack my things, so don't get in my way.
Wait, I'm not agreeing to a divorce.
You don't have to. You'll eventually have no choice but to agree.
What does that even mean?
Cutting Alexander off, I held out the envelope I'd received from the private investigator. Inside were multiple photos proving Alexander's affair. His face drained of color as I placed the photos in front of him. It was time to deliver the cold, hard truth. These are pictures of you cheating, right? You lied about work, about sending money to your family, and you even had me covering our living expenses so you could support your mistress.
That's not it. Penelope,
What do you mean that's not it? I've already confirmed with Olivia, and these photos were taken by a professional investigator, you know? Alexander was clearly stumbling over his words. I was fed up with him. He was only thinking about saving his own skin. Time to put an end to this farce. I declared loudly. Who knew you'd turn out to be such a lowlife, Alexander? I was a fool for being deceived, but what you did is unforgivable. Lying, manipulating, cheating. You're the worst of the worst. How can you even live like that?
Please calm down, Penelope. I'm sorry.
Sorry? You expect me to forgive you now? All this time you've acted like a hand-picked husband while manipulating me like I'm some kind of maid.
I'm sorry. Can we start over?
Start over? Get real. You've got nowhere to run, Alexander. I'll make sure you hit rock bottom. Prepare yourself. My words must have hit home. He sank to his knees, groaning. Ignoring him, I packed my bags and left the house. I got a lawyer and divorced Alexander. I demanded $30,000 from him and $15,000 from his mistress, both as one-time payments. He tried to get financial help from Lucas, but was of course denied. It didn't end there. He got cut off from his in-laws' house after I told them the truth. His mistress dumped him too, and now Alexander had no one left to turn to. All that awaited him was a lonely, miserable life. But I had no sympathy for him. He got what was coming for looking down on people. As for me, I moved into my company's dormitory and started a new life. Commuting got easier, and it was comforting to have friendly colleagues in the same dorm. Though I now had a divorce record, I had zero regrets. What's more important is that I can live as myself. Being married isn't the only path to happiness. From now on, I'll live a life that I can be satisfied with.